Nobody tells you that the moment your whole career turns around is going to look like a man in a wheelchair sitting alone in the rain, outside a loading dock at 6 in the morning. There's no manual for that. No corporate training module that says 12 years of being invisible ended because you knew how to read lips and had a decent umbrella. But that's exactly what happened, and I'm going to tell you all of it. Every quiet, grinding, deeply satisfying piece. My name is Arthur Vance. I'm 54 years old, living in Columbus, Ohio, with my wife June and our dog, a basset hound named Clementine, who has strong opinions about the couch and zero interest in negotiating. I work in industrial operations, or I did, at a level that matched what I was worth, only after 12 years of doing work that mattered for a company that treated me the way you treat a street sign. Useful. Present. Never actually looked at. 11 years in the same classification. 3 facility audits I ran solo, under budget, without incident. A workforce restructuring in 2019 that I managed so cleanly that the regional VP at the time had used it as a case study in his quarterly presentation. With my name removed, naturally. My reviews said things like Arthur demonstrates exceptional operational judgment, and Arthur consistently exceeds expectations for his level. 11 years. Not one change to the title on my badge. I didn't know it yet. Not on the morning of February 7th, not when I pulled into the parking structure at Meridian Industrial Group's Columbus Distribution Campus, with a travel mug of coffee and a vendor call I wasn't looking forward to. I didn't know anything, but the morning had already made up its mind about what would happen, and I was just the last one to find out. Let me tell you about Frank Riley before I tell you anything else, because you need the full picture. Frank was 48. My direct supervisor for the last 7 of my 11 years at Meridian, and the kind of manager who had built his entire career on one very specific skill. He was extraordinarily good at being in the room when things went right, and extraordinarily invisible when things went sideways. He was good-looking in a catalog way, always pressed, always confident, with a handshake so practiced it felt almost warm. He called people buddy in a way that should have felt friendly but somehow always landed slightly off, like a tie that's 1 inch too short. The 2019 restructuring. I need you to understand what that actually was. Meridian had inherited a logistics nightmare from a facility acquisition. A warehouse in Dayton that was hemorrhaging money through 3 overlapping vendor contracts, and a staffing classification system that made no operational sense. Corporate had given us 8 weeks and a budget I thought was unrealistic. I had spent 6 of those weeks living half in a hotel 20 minutes from the Dayton site, working with the floor supervisors and HR and 2 regional vendors to untangle something that should have required a 6-month engagement. June had driven down twice with a cooler of food because I was working through lunch and dinner both. She'd sat with me in the hotel parking lot on a Tuesday night while I ate leftover pasta from a Tupperware container, and she told me I was handling it better than I thought. We came in 4% under budget. Turnover in the first quarter post-restructure dropped by 31%. The vendor costs normalized within 60 days. At the company all hands in October, Frank stood at the podium and said, "The Dayton integration is a real success story for what this team can do when we work together." He had a slide with numbers on it. My name was not on the slide. I was in the 4th row. I clapped. The conversation I'd been building toward for 3 years finally happened in November. Frank's office. A Tuesday, the specific gray of Ohio in November pressing against the windows. Like it had personal grievances. I'd thought about this conversation for months. I'd thought about what I would say and how I would say it. I knocked on his doorframe. "Got a few minutes?" "Sure, what's up?" He didn't look up from his laptop. That was the first indicator. I sat down across from him. I told him I wanted to talk about trajectory, that I'd been at the same classification for 11 years with consistently strong reviews, that I thought it was time to have a real conversation about what a path to director of operations looked like and what specific criteria I needed to meet. Frank closed his laptop, slowly, the way people close laptops when they've already decided what they're going to say. "Arthur," he said, "you're one of the best operators I have. I appreciate that. But here's the thing." He leaned back. "We're in a position right now where we really need our best people exactly where they are. You know what I mean? The floor needs you. The Dayton model that only works because you're running it. I've been running the Dayton model for 4 years, I said. I built it. Right. The nod. The nod that heard nothing. So I'm asking, I said carefully, what would advancement actually look like, concretely? What would I need to demonstrate? Frank looked at me for a moment, then he said the thing. Look, he said, I'm going to be straight with you, because I respect you. He spread his hands on the desk. Guys with your background, your experience level, he paused, choosing, your compensation range. You'd be surprised how many of them are out there right now, looking. In this market. And we're giving you something a lot of them would line up for. He said it like it was generosity. The room was very quiet. I looked at Frank Riley for a long moment, and I thought about the hotel parking lot in Dayton, and I thought about June in the passenger seat with the Tupperware container, and I thought about 11 years of exceptional judgment going nowhere. I appreciate the honesty, I said. I walked back to my desk. I sat down. I opened the Dayton files, and somewhere below all the professional composure and deliberate breathing, something went entirely, completely cold. I didn't know it yet. But I was going to get everything I was owed, just not the way I expected. February 7th was a Wednesday that started wrong in the small ways Wednesdays do. Our water heater had been making a sound like it had opinions since Sunday, and the guy coming to look at it had rescheduled twice. I'd been on hold with the warranty company for 20 minutes the night before. I was already behind when I got to the Meridian campus, parked in the structure on the east side, and took the covered walkway toward the main building. I almost didn't see him. He was outside the walkway, off to the left, near the loading dock access road, sitting in a manual wheelchair, which he was managing himself, working the wheels slowly along the service lane that ran parallel to the building. He was older. Mid to late 70s, I'd say, though he was the kind of man who held himself like age was a concept he was still reviewing. Heavy wool coat, charcoal, the kind that's built to last, silver-haired, a leather messenger bag in his lap. It was February in Columbus, which means it was 34 degrees. And the sky was doing that thing, where it threatens rain without committing, and the service lane he was navigating had a slight grade to it, and 2 expansion joint cracks that his wheels kept catching in. The employee entrance was on the other side of the building. He was heading away from it. I stopped. There were 2 Meridian employees 30 feet behind me. I'd passed them in the parking structure. They'd taken the indoor route to the lobby. There was a facilities guy pulling a cart near the dock, earbuds in, head down. Nobody was paying attention to this man in the wheelchair working his way along a service road in 34-degree weather, going the wrong direction. I watched him for a second. He wasn't in distress exactly. He was managing. But he was managing alone, on a surface that wasn't cooperating, in the cold, without anyone seeming to notice he was there. I've got a brother-in-law, June's younger brother, who has been in a chair since a construction accident in 2014. His name is Ray, and watching him navigate the world, for the last decade has given me a specific kind of education. The way chairs catch in expansion joints. The way a 2-degree slope that pedestrians don't notice becomes meaningful work. The way people look past you when you're at a different eye level, not out of malice, mostly, just out of that particular habit of seeing what you expect to see. I walked over. "Good morning," I said, stepping off the walkway. "You look like you might be heading toward the visitor entrance. It's actually on the north side. I can show you if you want." He stopped and looked up at me. He had a quality of attention that I noticed immediately, the kind of stillness that comes from someone who has spent a long time learning to read situations without relying on ambient sound. His eyes moved across my face with a focus that was calm and direct and completely without hurry. "That would be helpful," he said. His voice was slightly deliberate in cadence, someone who has worked at being clearly understood. I followed the GPS navigation, which appears to have never visited this building personally. I laughed. It was a good line delivered with perfect dryness, and I didn't expect it. "The GPS is an optimist," I said. "There's a smoother route around the other side. The grade's better, and the pavement's newer. Lead the way." We went around the north side of the building. I matched his pace, which was unhurried. The surface was better, and the grade flattened out quickly, and it was still cold but less unpleasant than the service road. Do you work here? He asked. 11 years, I said. Operations. Long time. It is. He was quiet for a moment, and then, you like it? I glanced at him. It was the kind of direct question that older people ask when they've decided small talk is a waste of the time they have left. I like the work, I said. He heard the distinction. Those clear, attentive eyes didn't miss it. But the work and the place aren't always the same thing, I said. He nodded slowly. No, he said, they rarely are. We reached the visitor entrance. I held the door. He came through, and I went to the main reception desk where our morning receptionist, a young woman named Ashley, was just getting settled. This gentleman has a meeting upstairs, I said. Could you get him checked in? Of course, Ashley smiled. Who are you here to see, sir? There was a brief pause, and something in that pause had a quality I'd understand better later. I believe I'm meeting with your CEO, he said, Janet Mercer, though I should probably let her know I've arrived. Ashley's fingers had been moving toward her keyboard. They stopped. She looked at the man in the wheelchair with an expression of controlled professional recalibration. Can I get your name? Sir? Harlan, he said simply. Harlan Webb. Ashley's face did something small and involuntary, and I filed it away without knowing why. Mr. Webb, she said. I'll let Janet's office know right now. Please, can I get you anything? Coffee, water? I'm fine, thank you. I had a vendor call in 20 minutes. I told him it was good to meet him and that I hoped his meeting went well. He shook my hand, a firm, complete handshake, and said, Thank you for stopping. You didn't have to. Of course, I said. I went upstairs. The name hit me at 11:40, which is a slightly embarrassing amount of time to not understand something that should have registered immediately. I was in the middle of reviewing a vendor contract addendum when our operations coordinator, a sharp young man named Ben, appeared at my desk with the expression of someone who had been sitting on information for 4 hours and could no longer contain it. Hey, he said, very casually. Did you help someone in the parking area this morning? Older guy, wheelchair? Service road, yeah. He was headed the wrong way. Ben put both palms flat on my desk. Arthur. That was Harlan Webb. He told me his name, Arthur. Ben said it like I was missing something obvious. Harlan Webb. Webb Industrial. He built 3 distribution companies in the Midwest between 1978 and 2002. He sold Webb Logistics to Ashford Capital in 2009 for, he paused for effect, a number that made the business press in 3 states. He's on the boards of 2 manufacturing groups and holds a significant equity position in Meridian's parent company through the Ashford deal. I leaned back in my chair. He's here for a quarterly board consultation, Ben continued. When Harlan Webb comes to Columbus, people know he's coming. It's coordinated. There's a whole protocol. And he was on the service road, I said. And he was on the service road, Ben confirmed. Alone. In February. We looked at each other. I didn't say anything else. I turned back to my monitor. But underneath the professional stillness, something that had been quiet for a long time had opened its eyes. I told June that night, after dinner, after the dishes were done, and we were sitting in the living room with Clementine, draped across both our feet like a warm, opinionated draft stopper. June is 51, practical and precise in the way that comes from running a household and a part-time accounting practice simultaneously for 15 years. And she has a way of listening where you always feel like what you're saying is being taken seriously. She didn't speak for a moment when I finished. So the man you helped, she said, holds equity in the company's parent entity. That's the current understanding. Yes, and your CEO apparently dropped everything to come down and meet him. Apparently there was a protocol. June wrapped both hands around her mug. How do you feel? I'm trying not to feel too much about it yet, I said honestly. 11 years of building things up and having them go nowhere. I'm not doing that again. She looked at me steadily. Don't flatten it before it happens, she said. I'm not Arthur. Her voice was even, not unkind. You've been pre-disappointing yourself for years. You decide it won't work out before you find out. I've watched you do it. Don't do it with this. I looked at her. 15 years of marriage, 1 very opinionated dog, a lot of hotel parking lots and reheated dinners. Okay, I said. Good. She picked up her mug. And when it does work out, and I think it's going to work out, I want to be there when Frank figures out what he missed. I didn't say anything, but I didn't argue. The call came Thursday morning 8:52 a.m., not Frank, not HR. Janet Mercer's assistant, a calm and efficient woman named Carol. Mr. Vance, Janet would like to meet with you this morning if you're available. 10 o'clock, her office? My pulse did something undignified. I kept my voice level. I can make that work. I stood up. I straightened my jacket. Frank's glass-walled office was 12 feet to my left, and I felt his attention on me before I even turned. I turned. He was watching me, with the expression of a man who has noticed a variable he hadn't planned for. I gave him a small, completely neutral nod. Then I walked to the elevator. Janet Mercer was standing at her office window when I came in, looking out over the Columbus skyline with her hands clasped behind her back. She was 56, direct-spoken, with the compact efficiency of someone who had been making fast decisions for a long time and had gotten good at it. She'd taken the CEO role 3 years ago after the previous leadership transition, and in those 3 years the company had stabilized in ways that the previous 5 years hadn't managed. She turned when her assistant closed the door. "Arthur," she said. "Sit down. Thank you for coming up. Not thanks for making time. Just thank you," like she meant it. I sat. She sat across from me at the small conference table, not behind her desk. I noted that. "Harlan Webb," she said, "has mentioned you twice in the last 24 hours. I didn't speak. I'd learned in 54 years that some moments deserve room. He told me you saw him on the service road, figured out where he was trying to get to, and walked him to the entrance." She paused. "He also told me you two talked on the way." "A little," I said. "He mentioned that you told him the work was good, but the work and the place weren't always the same thing." Something in the room shifted. "He mentioned that," I said. "He did." Janet looked at me with the focused attention of someone who reads people for a living and does it well. "So I want to ask you the same question he apparently asked. 11 years here, Arthur. What does that actually look like? Not the review language. The real version." The office was very still, and I thought about November. The gray windows. The way Frank had spread his hands on the desk like he was presenting a gift. "Honestly," I said, "I'm good at this work. I think I'm genuinely good at it." I told her about Dayton, the 8 weeks, the 4% under budget, the 31% reduction in first quarter turnover, the vendor renegotiations, the fact that it had been used as a case study in a regional VP's presentation, and that my name had not been on the slide. I said it without heat, just the facts and what they meant. "My reviews have been strong for 8 consecutive years," I said. "I have been in the same classification for 11. Janet said nothing. I continued. "I had the promotion conversation," I said, "in November. It didn't go the way I'd hoped. Tell me." I told her about Frank's office, the laptop closing slowly. "Guys with your background and experience level, the implied replicability of a decade of work." I said it plainly. No drama, just the words and their meaning. Janet listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and I watched something move through her expression. Not surprise, but recognition. The look of someone having something confirmed that they'd partly suspected. "I want to tell you something," she said, "and I want you to understand it comes from 2 things. A conversation with Harlan yesterday, and 2 days of looking at your actual personnel file." "In that order." "Okay," I said. "Your file is exceptional," she said. It came out flat and direct, the way she apparently said most things. "The Dayton project alone, the documentation, the vendor renegotiations, the retention outcomes. That's director-level work, Arthur. That's not senior analyst work. That's not even senior manager work." She leaned forward slightly. "That work was completed 4 years ago. Nothing changed. That is a failure of this organization, not of you." I held very still. "I'd like to offer you the Director of Operations position," Janet said. "You'd oversee the Central and Great Lakes divisions. You'd have a seat on the Operational Leadership Council and report directly to the COO, with a standing quarterly briefing to me." She named the compensation structure. My face did one thing. Everything behind my face did something else. "Can I ask you a question?" I said. "Of course. Is this because of Harlan Webb? Because of the service road?" I needed to ask it. I needed to know it was real. Janet looked at me steadily. Harlan showed me where to look, she said. What I found when I looked is the reason. Those aren't the same thing. She paused. You earned this 4 years ago, Arthur. I'm sorry it took a service road in February to make us look. Yes, I said, I accept. The announcement went out at 3:06 p.m. I know the time, 'cause I was still at my old desk. Transitions require logistics, and I'd spent the afternoon in 2 meetings and a long conversation with HR. When the notification came through, subject line, leadership update, operations division, I watched the floor change the way floors change when 40 people read the same email simultaneously. The ambient hum shifted. Heads came up. Ben looked across the room, found my eyes, and gave one slow, emphatic nod. Frank's office door opened at 3:11. I didn't look up. I kept my eyes on my screen. I waited, because I had learned over many years that some things are better received from a position of stillness. His footsteps stopped at my desk. Arthur, he said. Frank, he was quiet for a moment. I could feel him assembling something. I just saw the announcement, he said. Me too. Director of Operations. He said it the way you say something when you're still processing whether it's real. That's what it says. Reporting to. He stopped. Started again. This wasn't something I was aware was being considered. Neither was I said, until this morning. He was quiet again. Something moved behind his eyes. Calculations, I think. A kind of damage assessment. The accounting of a man whose internal model has just been handed back to him, with a large, red correction on the front. I picked up my coffee mug and stood. You know, I said. 11 years of good work, Frank. Turns out somebody looked. I smiled at him. It was genuine. I want to be clear about that. Completely genuine. Have a good evening. I walked to the break room. I poured fresh coffee. I did not look back. The operational review was standard procedure. I want to be precise about that. I was director of operations now, responsible for 2 regional divisions, and a structured review of the past 4 years of operational documentation was the first thing any competent person in that role would undertake. It was not about Frank. It was not a search for anything. It was the job. What I found while doing the job was something else entirely. I spent the better part of 2 weeks going through vendor contracts, budget reconciliations, staffing records, and project documentation going back 6 years. What emerged was a picture I recognized immediately because I had been living inside it without being able to see the shape of it from the inside. Projects that had recovered from near failure, recovered by teams below Frank. Credit documented above. Personnel decisions that kept high-performing people in place without promoting them. Effectively, trapping institutional knowledge at a classification institution level where it was useful but not visible. The Dayton model, used in 3 separate regional presentations, sourced to the operations team in all 3. And then, in the procurement records from 2021 and 2022, something I had to read twice. A facilities maintenance subcontract, a sizable one, recurring, awarded through a competitive bid process that, on closer examination, had a document trail that did not hold together. 2 of the 3 bids in the process were from companies that shared a registered agent. The winning company had a principal who, when I searched the Ohio Business Registry, shared a last name and a street address in Westerville with someone in Frank's HR emergency contact file. I sat with it for a long time. I read everything again. Then I printed 12 pages of documentation, organized cleanly and factually, and called Carol. I need 30 minutes with Janet, I said. Today, if she has it. She had a 4 o'clock. I set the folder on the table in front of Janet and let her read. She read all of it without speaking. When she finished, she looked up, and her expression was the one I'd describe as completely controlled and deeply not fine. You found this in the standard review, she said. I wasn't looking for it, I said, but I can document every piece of it, and I wanted it in front of you directly. She nodded slowly. I'll need legal and HR involved immediately. I expected that. You could have done something else with this, she said. I know. She looked at me. Why didn't you? I thought about how to answer that accurately. Because I didn't want his ending to be the story, I said. He was never the point. The work was the point. I just wanted the work to matter. The corner of Janet's mouth moved slightly. It did, she said. It does. I was in my new office. Windows on 2 sides, view of the Scioto River on clear days, a desk I'd been slightly afraid to put anything on for the first week, when it happened. A Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks after the review meeting. I was going through Q1 vendor projections for the Great Lakes division when Ben sent me a text. He's leaving. Security walked him out. Then, he had a box. Then, Arthur, I am showing professional restraint right now, but please know it is costing me something. I set my phone face down on the desk. I looked out the window. The river was the flat pewter gray it gets in February, when the sky is low and even, and a pair of geese were moving against the current with the unhurried determination of creatures who've decided that inconvenience is simply part of the deal. Frank Riley was walking out of this building with a cardboard box. I thought about November. The slowly closing laptop. Guys with your experience level. The implied disposability of 11 years. I thought about the hotel parking lot in Dayton. June in the passenger seat with the cooler. The way she'd looked at me like I was handling something harder than I realized. I sat with the quiet of the moment for exactly as long as I needed to. Then I picked up my pen and went back to the Great Lakes projections. Harlan Webb came back to Columbus 6 weeks later. I found out because Carol called and said, with a precision I appreciated, that Mr. Webb had requested a meeting with me specifically. Not Janet, me. I took the elevator to the executive conference room on the 14th floor and found him already there, facing the window, his leather messenger bag on the table beside him. He turned when I came in with the particular attentiveness I'd first noticed on a service road in February. Arthur, he said. Mr. Webb. Harlan, he said, the same dry correction he might have given before if we'd gotten to last names that morning. Harlan, I said, and sat down across from him. He studied me for a moment. Outside, Columbus spread out below, gray and wide and ordinary in the best possible sense. You look different than you did in February, he said. Different how? Like you've put something down, he said. You were carrying something on that service road. It's gone. I didn't answer immediately. He wasn't wrong. I heard about Frank Riley, he said. I figured you might. Janet told me what you found, how you brought it to her. He folded his hands on the table. You could have used it differently. I know. You could have gone wide. Made it loud. Made it embarrassing for a lot of people. I could have. Why didn't you? I thought about what I actually wanted to say. Because his ending was never going to be my story, I said. I didn't spend 11 years being good at something just to make it about him at the finish line. Harlan was quiet for a long moment. Outside, a plane was tracking southeast, catching a strip of February sun that had found a gap in the clouds. I've built things my whole life, he said finally. Businesses, systems, teams. And the only thing you really learn, the only thing that holds up, is that the people who do the right thing when no one's watching are the ones worth building around. Not the talkers. Not the credit takers. He paused. On that service road, you saw me. You didn't see a situation to navigate. You just saw a person who needed to know where the door was. Anyone would have stopped, I said. He shook his head. You know that's not true. I did know. I just said it anyway. The way you say things when someone is being kind and you don't know how to receive it cleanly. He reached into his leather messenger bag and placed something on the table. An envelope. Heavyweight cream stock, a letterhead I recognized as Webb Capital Partners. I have a relationship with Meridian's parent company that goes back to the Ashford acquisition in 2009, he said. I don't have a formal role anymore, but I have standing to make recommendations. I opened the envelope. Single page. I read it once, and then, because my brain stalled out somewhere around the third paragraph, I read it again. It was a letter of formal commendation addressed to the Meridian Industrial Group Board of Directors and Senior Leadership, authored by Harlan Webb, citing specific operational contributions and recommending that the Director of Operations role be elevated to include cross-divisional strategic authority and representation at the quarterly board briefings. It named me by name. It used words like uncommon operational integrity and institutional value that was systematically underutilized, and it ended with a line that I read 3 times. I have met a great many people in 5 decades of business. The ones who stop when they could have kept walking are rare, and they are worth more than you know. I set the letter down carefully. You didn't have to do this, I said. I know, he said. I do very few things I have to do anymore. At my age, you've earned the right to do only what you mean. I looked at the letter again. My name in the third paragraph, sitting there like it had always been expected to be there. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Please." "That morning, when I came up to you on the service road, what did you think?" He was quiet for a moment. The strip of sun on the river had moved, spreading now, catching the surface differently. "I thought," he said, "that I wanted to know who you were." He said it simply, with the particular weight of a man who has seen enough to know that that specific impulse is rarer than it should be. We sat with that for a moment. "Go home," he said finally. "You've done enough for one February." I laughed. "The real kind, the surprised kind that arrives before you've decided to let it." "My wife will want to hear this," I said. "Tell her," he said, with the dry half-smile I'd first seen on a service road in 34-degree weather. "Tell her the furniture finally got a window." I stared at him. I hadn't used that word with him. Not that morning, not any morning. "I never said that to you," I said. "No," he agreed, eyes settled and quiet, giving nothing away. "You didn't." The formal elevation of the director role was approved 8 weeks later. Janet told me in a Tuesday morning meeting, matter-of-factly, the way she delivered most things. Effective immediately. Expanded divisional authority. Seat at the quarterly board briefing. I drove home that evening on 270, downtown Columbus receding in my rear view. Normal commute, normal traffic, a podcast I wasn't listening to. I thought about November for the last time. Not with anger, not even with the particular bittersweet satisfaction I'd expected. Just to close the loop. To let the circuit complete itself. You'd be surprised how many of them are out there. 11 years of good reviews and zero movement because the person responsible for translating performance into progress had decided I was more useful held still. Frank had left the building with a cardboard box and a call from the legal department and an ongoing procurement investigation that was, as of the last thing I'd heard, still not resolved. He had not come to find me on his way out. He had not sent a message. There was no dramatic final exchange, no moment of acknowledged reckoning, just a man, a box, and a security escort. 11 years of wait resolving into something quiet and final and complete. Real endings are like that. They don't announce themselves, they just arrive, and then they're done. June was already in the kitchen when I got home, Clementine conducting a rigorous sniff inspection of my work shoes, the particular smell of something good in the oven finding its way into the hallway. "How was today?" June asked. I set my bag down. "Good," I said. Then, because that was nowhere near sufficient, "It's done. The full thing. I have a seat at the quarterly board briefings now." She stopped what she was doing and looked at me. "The board briefings," she said, "starting next quarter." She came around the counter and put her arms around me, and I held on, and Clementine wedged herself enthusiastically between our ankles, with her ears dragging on the floor, which is her way of participating in moments she doesn't entirely understand but senses are important. "Frank called someone this week," June said into my shoulder. I pulled back and looked at her. "How do you know that?" "Ben texted me." "Why does Ben have your number?" "He asked for it at the holiday party in case of emergencies." This apparently qualified. I looked at her. "Apparently Frank is calling around," she said, "trying to understand his options, trying to explain some things." She paused. "Not finding many takers." I was quiet for a moment. Then I walked to the cabinet and got out 2 glasses. "We should open something," I said. "I already picked one," June said. "It's been on the counter since noon." I looked at the bottle. It was a good one, something she'd been saving. A California cab from a year that meant something to us. The year we'd moved to Columbus. The year things had started to feel like they were really ours. "You were that sure?" I said. She looked at me with the particular expression she wears when she's decided the moment has spoken for itself. "Arthur," she said, "I've been sure since the hotel parking lot in Dayton." I poured. We sat at the kitchen table, with Clementine between our feet, and the oven doing its quiet work, and the evening coming down outside the window over the sink. I thought about Harlan on the service road. I thought about the way he'd said "you stopped" like it was the whole sentence. Like it contained everything else. For 11 years, I'd been the steady, dependable, invisible infrastructure, holding up someone else's ceiling. I'd been so focused on not being seen that I'd forgotten the simple, uncalculated truth of that morning. I hadn't stopped because I thought anyone was watching. I hadn't stopped because I wanted anything. I stopped because a man needed to know where the door was, and I knew where the door was, and those two things lined up. That's all it was. That's all it ever had to be. June reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Outside, Columbus went about its ordinary winter-ending business. Somewhere in the dining room, Clementine had found the couch again and was doing absolutely nothing about it, and I let it go, and we sat there in the good quiet of a thing that had finally, completely, and, without fanfare, come out right.